Welcome back to the channel. We're going to continue working on our 1993 Mustang GT convertible. Now last time we got it back from the auction, we got it running, we got it all cleaned up, took it to the car show, brought it back and took it all apart. So now it's up on the frame rack and we're going to clamp it up and start pulling on it and see how much of this we can straighten and see what we're going to need for parts. I did find some parts for this thing, but there's some good and bad news. Good news is it's everything I need. Bad news is, well, I'll tell you later. That's a story for another video or maybe even a series. But anyway, onto our Mustang. Now, a lot of you had a question of how I got it running last time, and the answer is I reset this little guy. It's the inertia switch. It cuts off power to the fuel pump in the event of an accident because these things, key on, engine off or on, it just runs power to the fuel pump and pumps out fuel. So if this were to get into an accident and rupture a fuel line, if the key is on, it's just going to keep pumping out gas until, well, it finds an ignition source, I guess. And then it's going to ignite and we're going to have a lot of problems. So Ford designed this so that it gets in an accident, it just shuts off the power. If there's a rupture of fuel line, there's nothing pumping out. All the gas is going to stay in the tank. It was a pretty good design. I've actually never seen a bad one of these. Okay, I take that back. I've seen one bad one, but somebody else had tested it before I got to it and it was all melted inside. So I'm saying their testing might have had something to do with it and not actually a bad unit. So it's a pretty reliable thing. You can reset it as many times as you want. So it's not like you use it once and throw it away, which is a good thing because they actually, well, get reset a lot because in addition to shutting off power to the fuel pump in an accident, they also let you know if you slam the trunk too hard, somebody bumps into your car in a parking lot. Back in the 90s, stereo systems were big, so if your system hit hard, it let you know by shutting off power to the fuel pump. Can't think of any other reasons I have reset these. Oh yeah, that's right. Somewhere up on the A-pillars, so it lets you know if you slam the door a little too hard or your passenger kicks the kick panel a little too hard because they were right down there. But back in the 90s, well, I was towing these things in and pressing these buttons and making some money sending them down the road. I like these little guys. Hope that answers why they didn't start. They started this back in, I don't know, mid-80s maybe, and used it all the way up into, I think, the 2000s. It's been a while since I had to press one of these buttons, but that's all it was. Now, the next most popular question I got is, why did you buy a Ford if you hate them so much? And my answer is, when did I say I hated Ford? Now, is it because I made fun of Ford a lot? Well, I got news for you. If you've been a mechanic for any length of time, you're going to make fun of everything you work on. It is the only way to stay sane, fixing these things that never work the way they were designed to work. And Ford gives us a lot of material for that. My absolute favorite is the people that try to bash GM to hurt me like I care. I'm not brand loyal. My identity is not based on some brand. If your feelings are hurt because somebody made fun of a brand, you need to find a purpose in life. So that's not my problem. I'm gonna make fun of everything. And if you wanna make fun of GM to try to hurt me, go back and watch my video. I give you plenty of material. And Honda, Toyota, everything I work on, because no manufacturer is perfect. Ford just gives me lots of materials and the fans get extra upset. So that's why I do it. Now let's get into our car and upset some more Ford fans. Finally, we have a period correct car for our frame rack. We're putting these on the frame rack and they're brand new. So we have to lift it up so we can take our ramps out from underneath it. We can put our stands underneath. These stands did come with the frame rack. A lot of people ask if I trust the car on them, and I do. I work underneath it, so of course that is coming from a guy who's constantly scrutinized by the safety experts. So do with that information what you will. And now that it's sitting on the stands and off of the lift, we can work on the rockers or underneath the car or anything else we need to do before we put our clamps on the frame rack and lift it up and clamp it up. So in order to clamp it up, we need to be able to see the pinch weld. We need to pull our rocker moldings off of here. We also need to pull the rocker moldings off so we can get our fender off, and we're going to have to paint these things because this did not come with clear coat on it. Well, it did, but it's not there anymore. Car must have spent some time in the sun. There's a bunch of push pins in the bottom you just pop out, and then it slides into some metal brackets. The ones on the fender were already off from the fender being smashed into the door. We just have to pull it out of the rocker. And I missed one of the push pins. We'll pop that out of there. There we go. Now we can unbolt the front of our fender. Move our bracket out of the way. Then we're going to put the bolt back in there. I know where it goes later. We'll unbolt the top of our fender. There's one bolt on the bottom. This is why we had to take our rocker molding off so we could see it. And we found a present. Shims. Been a while. And that's not even someone's been here before. Back in the days when this car was new, shims were used to space fenders out. Nowadays, if you see shims, it's probably because some old tech didn't get things lined up where they belong, and they just shimmed it out like they did in the old days. There really isn't too many uses for shims in new cars anymore. The tolerances are much tighter. We open up the door and pull the bolt out of the top of the fender in the back, and the fender's off. Toss that in the pile. Now we're going to head over to the other side and pull our rocker molding off. This one has an extra screw in the back. Maybe somebody's been there before on the other side. So we'll pull that out of there. We'll pop all our little push pins out. And we'll start at the back and pull it out of its little tabs. Work our way forward. So now we need to get the front of it out, and it's attached across the front and across the top, so it's easier to start in the back. We can unbolt the front of our fender and run the bolt back in there so we don't lose it and know where it goes. We'll unbolt the top of the fender, and we'll straighten it out a little bit, see if we can get some of that bow out of it. We're going to try to save this fender. The buckle right in front of the wheel well. Put this bolt back in and see if we can get that buckle out of there. Basically just pulling it back where it belongs. It just bent because the front end went over. Hammer out the little dimple in there. Push out on the fender and hammer it at the same time, kind of stress relieving it so that hopefully it stays where we put it. We'll let the bodywork gnome finish it off, but we'll get it close. I want to know if I'm going to be able to save it or if I'm going to have to buy one. We'll hammer in the front of it where the bumper pulled it out. And we can unbolt the top of the fender. Ford was nice enough to give us about 3/4 of an inch adjustment on each side, so I probably could have lined that fender up even with it bent. Get all our bolts out on the top. Still have our one in the back. We still need to bend it in a little bit. That bracket is pulled out. So we'll use our fender straightening tool. Pull out on it and bend the bracket in and then push it in on the back to push it in a little closer. There is some adjustment on the back one as well, only about a 1/2 inch back there. But if we can straighten out that bracket, we won't have to use all of our adjustment. Just keep working it. And we got it pretty close, so we can unbolt it now. Take the bolt out of the bottom of the fender. Run it back and forth a couple times so we don't end up breaking it off. And there's our magical shim. I'll get that bolt in the top. And the antenna wire didn't want to play nice. It's supposed to unplug from the base, and I just gave up and unplugged it from the back of the radio. It just runs right behind the glove box. Super easy to take out. Tied a little string to it and pulled it through. So I'll just leave this string in there, and then when I go to put it back together, I'll tie the string on the antenna wire and pull it back through. We'll pull the antenna off of here just so it's not taking up so much room when I set it on the ground. And we'll pull our antenna wire out. I didn't want to risk ruining the base or the antenna wire, so I just left it in the base. Let's untie our little string. Tie it onto something else. And we'll go set this somewhere in a stand. And this door gap is really bothering me. I don't know why. They were never right from the factory, but this is worse than most of them. I'm thinking maybe they had a passenger that wasn't wearing their seatbelt, and when they got hit, the passenger got thrown into the door. So we're going to use our OEM Mustang door straightening tool. This is the heavy duty version. We're just going to twist our door back into shape. A little better. I'm not going to worry about the glass because our back window doesn't work properly, so it might not be all the way up. And there is some adjustment on that glass. But we still need to go out with the bottom of the door a little bit, so twist it a little bit more and see how close we can get it. Not looking too bad, and it even closed up our glass a little bit, so we'll worry about that later. I'd have to adjust the striker a little bit. In case you couldn't tell, I'm procrastinating having to clamp this thing up. So we're going to go back and do a little more work on the edge of our fender where the bumper mangled it. Straighten it all out, get it ready for the bodywork gnome. Now, in order to clamp these things up, there is a bracket on the bottom of the pinch weld that we're going to have to take off. Or I'm going to have to figure out another way. And I'm still thinking of another way. So we'll pull the skirt off the back here. Covers up the last portion of our pinch weld. There's one screw that's hidden underneath that front piece and two in the back. And before I strip that top one out, we're going to get a screwdriver, break it loose. And this one is also held on by a couple brackets, so we'll just peel it out of the brackets. And wiggle and pull. And now we'll pull the one off the other side. And this one's missing a screw. Somebody's been here before. It's missing two screws. I think somebody's definitely been here before. We also need to paint this as well, because the sun ate the clear off the top of it. Ate the paint too. It's right down to the plastic. Now we'll just wiggle it out of the brackets. There's all kinds of junk and dirt that gets trapped in there. And I figured out a way to clamp it up. The front of the pinch weld we're able to clamp onto without taking that bracket off the bottom. The bracket on the bottom is riveted on. There's probably about 40 rivets on each side, so I don't want to take them off. The back we just have sitting on a block, and I chained it down. Should be enough. It's not going to take much to pull this, so we'll find out. And since I'm not measuring it right now, I don't really care if it's the right height. Just going to do some rough pulls. Wheel our ram over here, and we guessed wrong on the height of our rack. So we got to stroll all the way back here. Once upon a time, there used to be a remote for this. Not anymore. Slide our ram on there. Flip the lock in. And it's time to go golfing. Not bad. 2 under par. So we'll start our first pull. The worst one. Pulling this rail out. It's all crumpled under there.
Take some slack up in the chain. Took quite a bit out. Then we're going to move it up. So in addition to pulling it forward, we're also going to pull it up because it's rolled down. It's rolling itself back up. That frame rail is not solid all the way back. There's an extension that goes in the very end, and that's what I'm pulling on. That's what's all bent up here. And the end of the frame rail is a little bent. We'll release it so we don't have to walk behind it. I really don't like getting hit in the head with the ram. And Mr. Spotty even showed up to help us. Now we're on the other side. We can pull it and do a little stress relieving on the end of that rail. Get that kink out of there. It stopped moving, so we'll pull it a little bit more and a little more stress relieving. Get the rest of that out of there. And we can release it. Hopefully it stays where we put it. We can unbolt our airbag sensor and the bracket. It's a little crammed in there. I'll fish the airbag sensor out of there. These have a wiring harness that are attached to it that goes back to the front of the tower. And the wires are not repairable per Ford's instructions, and they always used to get cut. So even if the airbag sensors weren't damaged, but the wires were, you end up having to replace them all the time. Regular airbag sensors. There's 3 of them on the front of this thing. There's the harness for the middle one. Set that off to the side. It's separate from the lighting harness. We need all that out of the way. One bolt our ground wire. And we'll set the harness up on the engine, get it out of our way. We can unbolt this little air dam on the front. Just one part of it. We're going to cut our radiator support out of here. So I'll just leave it on the radiator support. And I'm going to cut it right here. And hopefully only the radiator support. I need to cut the radiator support out of here so that I'm pulling only one rail at a time. There's no point in straightening both of them out at the same time. It'd be easier just to straighten them independently, so I'm separating them. Cut the bottom of it on the other side. Make sure we're not cutting through something we might need. And toss that in a pile. Now we can unbolt our hood latch. We'll put the bolts back in so we don't mix them up. And those are pretty obvious where they belong, but still don't want to mix them up. Pull our power steering cooler line off. Power steering cooler, actually. And now we're going to press our luck and see if we can cut through just the radiator support up here. I like to live dangerously. Alright, we didn't cut any wiring harnesses, any hoses, we're good. Got the piece to the top of our rail, and the other side at our apron. We aren't going to let this fall on the floor because that airbag sensor is still attached to it, and I don't want to ruin the airbag sensor. We'll gently set that in the pile. Now we can remove our Magic emissions erasing box. It's a little bent, and all the Magic fairy dust is falling out of it. It's a charcoal canister with little pieces of charcoal that the fuel vapors go through. Look at all the forbidden sprinkles coming out of there. Now that our radiator support is out of there, we can go ahead and pull on this rail all by itself. It'll move independently from the other one. Gotta go over quite a bit. Get that buckle out of there. Luckily, moves pretty easy. A little stress relieving. Get the buckle out of the bottom of the frame rail. And we're gonna pull our mass airflow sensor and air tube out of here. We unplugged it, but a little seal stayed in the mass airflow sensor. I know it's gonna fall out of there, so put it back in the plug where it belongs so I don't lose it. There's a bracket that holds it to the tower, so we can unbolt that. Loosen up the clamp on the throttle body. And now we got a little more room to see and work in there. So since our hamster holder was in the way, I wasn't able to get a hammer in there and just hammer on that frame rail. So I put the port power in there, pushed up against the engine, and just flattened it out as I pulled. And pretty much flattened that frame rail right out. Got to improvise. But it worked. Our frame rail is straight, so we can head on over to the other side. Our grape juice dispenser is going to be in the way, so we're going to have to pull this out of here. One bolt in the back and a tab in the front, and one plug. And I don't want to break the tabs, so we'll use a little pick to pull the tabs out and pop the plug off. We'll just leave the hose on the bottom of it so we don't have to drain the thing. We'll set it up on the cowl. We'll pop our coil cover off of there. Those usually never made it back on. Unbolt our battery hold down and pull our battery out of here. Now I know that bolt in the bottom of the battery tray should have an 8mm head on it, but my micrometer says it doesn't. And now so does the socket. So we'll pull out the other ones that are still 8mm. And try to figure out how we're going to get that other one out of there. We'll try a 7mm and see if it is rusted away enough. And it has. Rusted away evenly down to a 7mm. Once upon a time that had an 8mm head. Now we can wiggle our battery tray out of here. Somehow it survived. It's not broken at all. We can unbolt our airbag sensor and bracket. We get the impact into this one, so we'll use this antique ratchet for the antique car. Or decided to route the wires around each other, not make it easy. I need to get these airbag sensors out of here. So now we can start pulling our rail over. This one's a little twisted and pushed over. So we're going to pull it back. Just have the chain around that extension on the end. Let's stress relieve the back of our rail where our kink is. Today on Amazing Discoveries, I'm actually going to use a breaker with the correct hammer to knock these spot welds out. I could drill them, but I'm too lazy for that, so we're just going to tear them out of here. We're not going to need any of this. At least I hope I'm not going to after I destroy it. We just need to get this plate off the end so that we can get a little room in there. Because I need to pull on just the inside And my clamp won't fit through that little hole in the bracket, but it will fit now. Tighten up our clamp. We're just going to give it all the ugga-duggas. Make sure these things stay on there. And now we can give it a pull. And we're basically just taking out the twist that was in there at the end of our frame rail. Move our trans cooler off to the side / radiator tank. And we can hammer out the end of this frame rail and flatten it out. A little more tension on it. And hammer the rest of it out of there. This side was nowhere near as bad as the other side. But honestly, I think the right side was easier to straighten.
So our frame rail came out nice and straight. Our kink back there is all gone. We got a little bit of a wrinkle up here to straighten out, but everything was isolated to just this little cap. It's kind of like a crumple zone. It ends right here, so when the bumper shock goes in enough, then this goes in, folds up inside here, and then that's pretty much it. And it's into the passengers. So everything, as bad as it looked, was right here. So when we change this little extension with the radiator support, we'll be good to go. We can hammer out this part here, make it flat. And our aprons, I could put a little work into it, but I'm not sure if I'm gonna get a used one and it's in good shape. It's easier just to change it than waste the time straightening it out. If I can't get one, I'll go ahead and straighten it. We'll see what I get. The other side, I could probably get away without replacing this little extension on here, but you have to take them apart to get the radiator support that slides over it out of there. So it's easier just to change it all together anyway. So again, we'll see what I get for parts, and that'll decide what I change over here. Definitely got to change the radiator support. Same with the apron as the other side. This one is got a little bit of more work up on the top here. So we'll see. I might straighten it and I might replace it. Depends on what I get for parts. So that's as far as we're gonna go on our little Mustang here for today. We got everything pulled, and a rough pull. We're gonna put it back up on the frame rack later, but I need to get it off of here because I am gonna drop the engine and trans out of here. It'll make painting a whole lot easier, and there's some mechanical work that I need to do to this engine, and it'll be a lot easier to do it when it's not in the car. So you put all that together, and the time it takes me to drop the thing is definitely worth the time saved when I'm trying to do everything else. So that's what we're gonna do. And it makes for a nicer job when it's out of the way and we don't have to work around it. So as soon as we get some parts, we can start throwing this back together or taking the rest of it apart after we figure out what we're gonna need and what we're gonna be able to throw away. Until then, we're gonna have to park this in the corner and go work on something else. So thanks for watching, and I'll see you when I have some parts.
I don't ever slow up, no I don't take sh. I got no love for the fakeness. If you wanna play tough and wanna hate this, I'll always show up.